clergyman. I'm the founder of an organization called Mind Forward Alliance, and before that I founded another organization called Mental Health First Aid. So basically I've been working in the mental health world in the UK since I was about 23. I came to this country when I was 18 months old and grew up here. I'm British Bengali or British Bangladeshi. I'm third generation here. I've got a blended family of 4 kids and I love London. Most of my career has been in mental health in the workplace, and just this week, yesterday, we landed the world's first most comprehensive piece of research on workplace mental health, where we interviewed 12,000 people, 12,200 people in 12 different countries, asking them about their experience of mental health in the workplace. It's been phenomenal to get this data because it's never happened before, and it gives insights into the fact that 1 in 2 people said that they had experienced a mental health problem in the last month of the survey. I think it was something like a third of people said that if their workplace didn't take it seriously, if their managers didn't take it seriously, then they wanted to leave their work. They experienced low motivation and they struggled with connecting with their peers at work and their customers and their clients. And conversely, 85% of people said that if their employer was vocal about being supportive around mental health, they felt that their business and the employer cared for them. I mean, the insights in this research report is phenomenal, but that's what I do. I lead global workplace mental health agenda and work with WHO and UN and other organizations to help normalize mental health into employment and workplaces, because I believe that businesses and workplaces are a cornerstone of society, and if we can bring mental health out of the health system or the healthcare system into our kitchen tables, into our workplaces, we then solve a problem, and we create an environment where people can flourish everywhere in life, and it prevents mental health difficulties starting, but it also catches people early, because when we go to the doctor, by the time we go to see a medic, it's usually because we're experiencing quite severe difficulties. Whereas if you can catch it while you're losing sleep and feeling irritated and your mood is low, actually you prevent yourself from getting unwell in the first place, or getting more unwell in the first place. So that's what I do. That's been my career's work. The Sari, interestingly, more recently, I've stopped calling it the Sari and adopted the Shari, because I grew up with the word Shari, which is what Bangladeshis call it. And yet, I guess because the Sari is the more commonly known word. And I think that's important to say, because the Shari to me is identity and belonging. It's also protest. So when you grow up, I grew up as a British Bengali in this country. In the 80s, I experienced extortionate amounts of racism. My mum and aunties, when they were dropping us off to school, they would be called racist names because they wore their sharis. So for me, when I'm putting a shari on and walking around in a place like this in Somerset House, it's protest, but it's also solidarity with all the women, all the shari-wearing women that have migrated to other countries and that have been othered, or that have had their belonging disturbed in some way that then affected their mental health. That's what the shari means to me. So, and my shari journey, it started as a child, really. So I remember, my mum wore a shari wallpapering the house, cooking, cleaning, everything. I never saw her in anything other than the shari. So it was always part of my everyday upbringing. She'd get up in the morning and she'd put a shari on and then she would go. So that was really, it was never an alien thing for me. But I have a very strong memory of the shuti shari, the cotton shari. when I was in Bangladesh as a child, I remember my mum had a peach plain cotton shari that she would wash and starch, and it would be hung in the veranda from one end to the other, and me and my cousins would play amongst the sharis. And that memory really stayed with me. So when I was a teenager in this country, we only wore synthetic sharis because that was what the stuff was imported in. At the time, it was all the synthetic sharis that all the Bollywood actresses were wearing. So my shari education really came from watching Hindi films. So it was all the bling sharis. I hardly ever saw the jamdani, the shuti, the banaras. Like, I didn't see the hand woven sharis. But the memory of that cotton shari of my mum in Bangladesh stayed with me. So through my career, through my key life stages, I remember the first time I wore a shari at an event was my cousin's. I was only about 12, and it was my cousin's birthday celebrations, and I was so chuffed, and I wore it with a jacket with shoulder pads in, and I still remember that. But then through life, I would wear the shari at like key conferences. So whenever I got invited to a big conference, I would assess whether this was a conference that I felt brave enough to wear a shari at. And in early career, that was a little bit more difficult because my confidence wasn't there. But as I grew in confidence, as my work became more status acquiring, I was more courageous. And these days, any big event, you'll see me in a shari. And in fact, not even any big events, any day-to-day stuff, you'll see me in a shari. So the journey really began in terms of external was through conferences and big events. And what would be really interesting was there would always be 2 or 3 Asian women, young women, who would stay behind and say to me, it's so good to see you on stage wearing a shari, and you're not talking about diversity, you're not talking about inclusion, you're talking about mental health, you're talking about business strategy, you're talking about, so it's not like here you're representing culture, you're representing a serious business agenda, and yet you're in a shari. And that would always make me think, do you know what, I'm creating a sense of role modeling for the next generation to say, look, we don't have to assimilate in every single way, and we can bring our identities to the table. So that's been my shari journey in terms of personality and confidence. But in terms of acquiring sharis, I really wanted to own some cotton sharis, and whenever we got presents, everybody always buys you the bling, nobody gave me a cotton shari as a present. That wasn't, because I think it was seen in my family as, a cheap shari to give someone. And so one day I found one of a shop on the internet in India actually, which was selling cotton sharis, and I ordered every single color plain cotton shari, including the peach one that my mum, I remember her wearing. And that they just feel like one big hug to me. It's wool cotton, so it's really soft. I don't starch them, and I wear them especially on home days or days that I feel like I need a big hug. And my favorite shari, in terms of the signature weave, is the jamdani. And in fact, the jamdani is so important to me in terms of its craftsmanship and the fact that the craft is UNESCO protected because it's one of the hardest crafts in the world. But also the fact that it nearly died because of colonial policies. So the revival of the jamdani is also the spirit of the Bangladeshis, of the spirit of Asia. So I've actually got a mural of the jamdani painted on the front of my house in Brighton, and it draws quite a lot of attention. But I also wrote a blog about what that means, because actually I'm a British Bengali, and it's my dual identities that is on the front of my home, describing, owning, I guess, what that means. But I also always look out the window, on days that I'm not working and just sitting around, and see the reactions of people that are walking by. And sometimes Asians stop and are like, that's a shari. And that makes me feel good, because actually, how do we foster belonging in migrant communities? You don't see the art of our cultures or our other cultures. So the jamdani is absolutely the most favorite. This is a Rajshahi hand-painted silk, and I bought this in Rajshahi in Shopura Silk House, which is a renowned shari shop in Bangladesh, and I absolutely love it. I wore it to my daughter's graduation. It's the most comfortable and sophisticated shari, and it's hand-painted. How do you even I don't know how to even describe this. So I guess Rajshahi silks and Jamdanis are probably my two favorites.